Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar sponsored by the Florida Alliance for Arts Education. This title this afternoon is Learning Goals, Staying on Track, Class to Class and Through the Year. And my name is Dr. Linda Levens, and I'm so pleased to have you here this afternoon with me. I want to point out, number one, you are all muted, and that just helps make sure that if your phone rings, and I'm always worried that mine will, but if your phone rings or someone comes in and wants to speak with you, that just prevents any interruptions to the webinar, which is being recorded. So if something goes by very quickly, and you don't get a chance to ask a question, then you can go to the archived version of it on the Florida Alliance for Arts Education website, or you can refer to it, refer other people to it later on. I would like to point out, along the same vein, that there is on your control panel down the right side, there is a section marked Questions, and if you open that up, you'll see that there's an area in which you can write questions and then click on Send, and that will come to me and to the gentleman in the background who is helping us with technology. And when I see a question, I will stop to read that question aloud to everyone as quickly as possible and to answer it for you as quickly as possible, so that because not everybody will see the question, and I will read it and respond to it as quickly as I can and as is appropriate to wherever we are in the webinar. So let's get started and see what we can do to stay on track using learning goals from class to class and throughout the entire year. Let's begin by looking at why course descriptions, and this references back to the first webinar that we had. This is a slide directly from there, and as I said, all of our webinars will be archived on the Alliance website. And so beginning with, why would we use course descriptions? Well, number one, state law, Florida statute, requires that we use the state-adopted course descriptions, which they describe as prescribed courses of study. And then furthermore, there is language in the State Board of Education rule that requires us to use these course descriptions exactly as adopted by the state. And furthermore, as students move perhaps from one district to another or from one school within a district to another, this helps align learning so that students are able to pick up from district to district. They're able to pick up wherever they left off, hopefully, as they move from school to school. We also hope that these course descriptions will help move arts education forward. I've noted technology, but there are some other areas too in which we hope that having those descriptions will move arts education forward. They are, of course, very important for data collection. It helps us track enrollment, and so many of you know about the two research data collection projects that the Florida Music Educators Association has done, and it has shown that arts education, the more arts education students have, the greater the benefits. And it also allows us to see portions of the state where the arts are strong or perhaps where they're not provided at all, and where we need to focus on helping schools and districts provide arts education. And it also helps with accountability at all levels, the district, certainly at the state level, and at the classroom level. Looking forward, let's take a moment to consider why we would need to be concerned. Well, first of all, course descriptions are the source for everything else to do with arts education. They are the source, the go-to place for developing learning goals, for developing essential questions, and for all student assessments at the classroom, and also, as many of you know, the race to the top item development that is being done that can be used at the classroom level, and also that can be used eventually in the future at the district or school level to create assessments. But let's go back to learning goals because that's today's topic. It's where we'll find the benchmarks and standards addressed by the learning goals. It's also what will help us then devise the success criteria, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and then all types of teacher-created classroom assessments. So the course descriptions, which we used to be able to alter a little bit, the course descriptions need to be used exactly as they are, and then they are the go-to source for the learning goals that we'll be talking about today and for the assessments that you as teachers would be creating. So let's move on. Learning goals, to create or not to create. Well, if you think about it, if you have learning goals, or let's look first, if you don't have learning goals, then your instruction really could sort of be all over. This is my favorite one, now that's my favorite unit to work on. But if we have learning goals, we can be very, very focused and we can be on target all the time. So my suggestion, of course, is to create those learning goals so that as we work from day to day and throughout the year, that we can be very, very focused in our instruction. And better yet, our students can be very, very focused with us in how they're working to be engaged in learning and working toward those learning goals as well. What are learning goals? And I went to the Berkeley Teaching Resources. I felt they really had a very concise look at the various pieces of learning goals. Learning goals answer the question first and foremost, what do I want my students to know and be able to do by the end of this course? And that's really the sum total. But let's look at some other ways to put this. Learning goals are a very short list of concepts. They guide your teaching. They add clarity to what it is you need to make sure your students know or are able to do by the end of the course. So they guide. They're a short list of concepts. And they also help students know, because you're going to see in just a little bit that these are not items that you hide somewhere in your planner or in a digital planner. These are things that you share with students. And then they add value to your teaching and learning, student learning. So they contribute to the structure of the course. They help you select the various components of instruction. So the planning, assessments, grading practices, and all of the other pieces, the content, the activities. They also help students by providing signposts that tell them where the course is going. And this I love. It puts students inside the logic. And I love that concept. It puts students inside the logic rather than outside the logic. And when they're inside the logic, when they understand what the learning goals are, it gives them a sense of ownership in the learning process. And that's very, very important in keeping students engaged in the learning process. They feel part of it when they have some sense of why they're learning what they're learning. Every one of us, I think, has had some moment when students have moaned and groaned and said, in fact, I think most of us have moaned and groaned at one time or another at any level of our learning and said, why do we need to learn this? And if we had some sense of what the logic was for learning a certain item, if we had a sense of ownership in that learning process, we wouldn't have felt that way. It's also a useful communication tool among colleagues, with our administrators, with parents. Most centrally, it's a useful communication tool with our students. That's the most important thing. So why learning goals? Marzano, who we know a lot about in this state, has two central thoughts that I pulled from his work. Number one, the starting place for all effective instruction is designing and communicating. It's not enough to design them. Communicating clear learning goals. And he says, sort of on the flip side of this, if teachers aren't sure of instructional goals, their instructional activities won't be focused, and unfocused instructional activities do not engender student learning. So if you go back to that target that I showed you a few minutes ago, the one with the arrows all over it, this second bulleted item, if they aren't sure of instructional goals, then they won't engender student learning. That's that target with the arrows all over it. The first one, the starting place for all effective instruction, was the second target, the one that had two arrows, one splitting the other, both of them dead center and on target. Moving on, let's take a look for sources for creating learning goals in your classroom. And what is that source? It's what I shared with you a few minutes ago. It's the course description, which I'll sometimes reference as CD, the components of the course description. And the primary components will be the descriptive paragraph that appears at the beginning, the arts benchmarks, and the non-arts standards. And I've also marked the access points. One of the things that many people may not be aware of is that when the Florida standards were created, the Next Generation Sunshine State Standards, in the arts and all of the other content areas, when they were created around 2009, 10, 11, somewhere in there, all of the benchmarks and standards had equivalent access points for students with significant cognitive abilities. And they were created at 3 levels: independent, supported, and participatory. And so with each benchmark will be some sort of associated access point times 3, as it were. So for students with significant cognitive disabilities at 3 levels: independent, supported, and participatory. So if you have students who need to have their learning guided by access points, not only will you be guided by arts benchmarks, but also the arts access points and the non-arts standards and the non-arts access points. So please be aware that those are there, and that they are also there for your use in creating learning goals if you have students who need them. Please make sure that you access for those students who do need them. So let's take a look on how we create learning goals. Beginning with what we sometimes call WALT, we are learning to. And remember I said that we do this in a sense for the students. So having the students see this from their perspective, we are learning to. So if you start the learning goals with that sentence stem, we are learning to, then that helps students understand that it is from their perspective. And then you will have selected, and we'll go through this in a few minutes, you'll have selected some benchmarks and standards that naturally fit together to support the learning goal that's needed. And so you'll, in a sense, restate them as one unified learning goal. So it'll be we are learning to, and then you'll restate that group of benchmarks or standards in a sense. You're going to use language that's appropriate to whatever grade level or grade levels you're teaching. So obviously, a learning goal that you work on for sophomores is going to have to be significantly reworded for students in upper elementary. You're going to use action verbs because learning is an active activity. As nothing redundant about that sentence. Learning has to be active. And then avoid how-to instructions or avoid a quality of completion. So any kind of criteria you need to make sure is in another part of what we're going to learn today. So avoid the how-tos when you're doing the learning goal, and then post it on the wall or on a bulletin board or on the whiteboard. Explain to students why they're learning it. Remember the Berkeley statement. Students need to be inside the logic rather than outside the logic. So let's take a look at a course description. We're going to look at Theater 2, and if you give me just a moment, I'm going to change screens. And here we go to my other screen, and I have loaded here course description for Theater 2, which is 0400-320. And you're seeing my screen live, so you're going to see me scroll through this screen. And here you'll note that it's for high school, grades 9 through 12. It is a 1-credit, 1-year course. It's been State Board approved. And I'm going to bring up where you can see it now, the version description. And what I'm going to be looking for are some keywords that will help me to know exactly what it is this course is looking for. So I'm looking for, let's see, this course is designed for students with a year of experience or more, so it's obviously not a first-year course, and it promotes enjoyment and appreciation. So there's something that's important, promotes enjoyment and appreciation for all aspects of theater. So I'm going to note that, and I've jotted that down on my paper. Build significantly on existing skills, and I'm going to jot that down. Let's see, classwork focuses on characterization. There's something I should note. So I'm going to have to help students work to develop characterization. I'll note that down. These are things that it looks to me like the writers of this course description wanted teachers to target. It doesn't say how they should target it, but students need to learn these things. So I'm going to jot down characterization. Here's another one, playwriting. Playwrights' contributions to theater. There's another one. And then let's see, improvisation, creative dramatics, scene work. So there are 3 more, improv, creative dramatics, and scene work. And then let's see, acting skills, and then technical aspect of scene work. So let's see, I've got promotes enjoyment, 1, builds significantly on existing skills, 2, characterization, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've got about 10 headers here, 10 headers. So let's see, I'm going to go down through, and let's look now at the standards and benchmarks that are in this course. So here's some from math. These are math practices. Use appropriate tools strategically, attend to precision, look for and make use of structure. So use appropriate tools might be when I'm using technology, when the students are using technology. That could be research, or that could be when we're doing the technology piece, the technical theater piece, I'm sorry. And so we're doing that. Attending to precision could be when we're maybe looking at the technical theater piece and we are doing things to scale, perhaps. And then maybe we could look for make use of structure in a variety of ways. We might use this in several of those headers. And then language arts, speaking and listening 1.1. Let's see, oh, we're going to be using this one a lot. This one's about discussion. We'll be discussing quite a lot. And you can see that I'm starting to look to see that I would be putting this with several of those areas. I would be having the students talk about characterization a lot. They would be talking a lot about their acting skills and enjoyment and appreciation, a lot of those things. So as I go down through each of these standards, I would say, determine an author's point of view. Well, I would look at that maybe when we're doing playwriting, maybe playwrights' contributions to theater, characterization, and so there's that. Speaking and listening 1.2, it might be if they're doing a research project or if they're looking at several different scripts around the same topic. Evaluate a speaker's point of view would certainly be good with characterization. So I'd write LACC 910, speaking listening 1.3, down under characterization. And I would go down through all of these standards, what we've been calling Common Core, now Florida standards, and I would assign them under one or more of the items that I listed before: scene work, acting skills, improvisation, all the things that I pulled out of that paragraph, that descriptive paragraph. Now as I come down to skills, techniques, and processes, I see that there's a music benchmark in this theater course, and I would assign that to perhaps characterization, improvisation, creative dramatics, scene work. And you see that I would go right down through and assign every one of these to at least one, if not several, because we know it takes time, and we need to go at several benchmarks and standards more than once in order for students to really be able to know and do and understand a given benchmark from several directions, as it were. So if that starts to make sense, I would have this series of headings to say, well, this course description was designed so that students would build significantly on their current skills, they would develop characterization skills and playwriting skills, they would learn about significant playwrights and their contributions to the theater, and then I would have a series of benchmarks and standards under each one that would help them to know, that would help me as the teacher to know what benchmarks and standards I was going to address under each one of those. So now if you can imagine, I've got sort of a list of headers and benchmarks and standards to support each header. So I've got sort of learning targets suggested by that descriptive paragraph and groups of benchmarks and standards. And notice I selected them only from the course description. I didn't go anywhere else to find them. Remember, it's stated in state rule and in Florida statute that these are prescribed learning courses. So then I'm going to use the language of those groups of benchmarks and standards to create learning goals. I'm going to start with we are learning to, and then I'll look at those benchmarks and standards, and it may be that as I look at characterization, I might not want to do just one learning goal on characterization. I might want to do one that starts with learning to recognize character development and how it builds over time. And then I might go to another learning goal that talks about how to create characters or how to write character lines or something like that. So character development might require one learning goal, it could require 2 or 3 learning goals, and you may use some of the benchmarks and standards for some of your learning goals, but not necessarily all of the learning goals. You'll have to determine which benchmarks and standards support and belong with which learning goals for characterization. So characterization may take 1 learning goal, it may take 2 or 3 or 4. You'll have to determine in your content area, in your courses, and for your learning goals, what is needed and when. How much time will it take? How much time do you have is part of the formula. So then you determine the learning goals, design the goals, and it may take more than 1 learning goal per target. Moving right along, what's the next step? Be sure each learning goal is in student-friendly language. And then you have to determine, of course, what learning activities are best suited to help your students reach each learning goal. And if you look at the benchmarks and standards, they often have suggested activities built into them. Many of the language arts benchmarks, in a sense, suggest, well, they're going to do some research, or they're going to be reading some specific types of textbooks, or they're going to be reading scripts, for example, if we're looking at this particular course. And so there are all those possibilities. Taking a look at them, they're going to be writing, they're going to be reading, they're going to be rehearsing, they're going to be developing characters. All of these things are built into many of the benchmarks. They're going to be doing, they're going to be analyzing, they're going to be doing things. And so what are the activities, the learning activities that will be best suited to helping students reach each learning goal. And remember, those benchmarks and standards will help you. And then the next step, once you've decided, well, I think this learning activity and that one and another one will be good to support these learning goals, then you're going to determine the criteria for each activity. And we call this criteria success criteria. Why would we want success criteria? Well, first of all, it helps us and our students outline what needs to be done to achieve that learning goal. It encourages our students to learn somewhat independently, and it helps them improve their understanding. It also provides a means for them to be accountable, to self-assess. And one of the wonderful things it does, if you've ever heard students say, well, I just don't get it. Well, what don't you get? What don't you understand? Well, I don't know. I just don't get it. And you can have a circular discussion with students for a very long time, and it's frustrating for both you and the student. But how wonderful it would be if a student could look at the success criteria, this outline of what needs to be done in order to achieve the learning goal, and the student could say, well, I understand this part, and this part, but that's the part I really don't get. And that allows a student to identify a learning gap. It also allows you as a teacher to identify a learning gap. And as you plan a reteaching, as you plan differentiated instruction, it allows you to help that student really target what needs to happen next. And then how do you create success criteria? Well, you create it by supporting learning by linking all activities to the learning goal. That's the first thing. All activities. No activity is floating out there just an activity for activity's sake, but all activities link back to the learning goals. And learning goals are designed, if you're doing them from the student perspective, what I'm looking for. So the student is looking for his or her ability to do. And these can be stated as I can statements. So I can do this, I can do that. I can write an introductory paragraph that restates the question. I can write an expository paragraph. I can write a character line. I can write a character description. So they all begin with I can statements. That's one way to do them. There are other ways of writing success criteria, and you'll see some as we go along. And make sure that you use age-appropriate language, and that's because right underneath your learning goal for this class will be the success criteria. And then the nice thing about success criteria is that they double up and adapt very, very easily into a rubric or a scale. Here's one expert's view of success criteria, and that's that they summarize for students the key steps or ingredients needed to fulfill the learning intention or the learning goal. They give the main things students need to do or include or focus on. And that's very important for students. They need some guidance about what's required. So let's once again, keeping learning goals and success criteria, let's once again get course specific. And I want to remind you that if you have any questions, because I'm moving along pretty quickly, let me just remind you that there is a question panel down quite a ways on your control panel. If you have any questions, please let me remind you now. If you type your questions in and hit send, I will make every effort to answer them quickly online so that everyone can hear your question, because somebody else may want to ask that same question and just not quite want to, or they may have that same question but just not have the courage to ask it. So be brave, ask the question. Great. Somebody's written that I was under the impression that I can statements were used in writing the learning goal, not the criteria. I imagine that there are a lot of ways out there. I think there's no harm in writing a learning goal as I can. Certainly it's something that students want to be able to do, And so I can is one way of doing it. If, however, it's not a process but a conceptual learning goal, you would need a different sentence stem. I don't think there's any hard and fast rule. I can statements aren't even always appropriate for success criteria. It's just one way of doing it. And so I think if I can statements work for you when you're writing learning goals, go for it. The idea is writing learning goals. And so if you want to start them with I can and that works for you, go for it. I don't think there's any right or wrong, any good, bad, or indifferent. The idea is learning goals are great. And so go for it and go for writing the success criteria to help break that learning goal into manageable criteria so students know what it is they need to do. So I'm going to change screens again so that we can look at the course description once again. And I'm going to tell you that now I'm looking at this course description with a unit in mind, and it's a unit on playwriting. And so I've highlighted the word playwriting, and I'm going to share with you what Shannon O'Brien, who wrote one lesson as part of a unit on playwriting, who wrote a lesson for us as part of our best practices. And for that unit, she focused on three items, one standard and two benchmarks. So here's the standard, which is LACC for grades 9 and 10. And this is develop and strengthen writing as needed by planning, revising, editing, rewriting, etc. And so this looks at rewriting and revising. And let's scroll down until we find the other two benchmarks. This is theater grades 9, 12, and it falls under critical thinking and reflection. Big idea, critical and creative thinking, self-expression, and communication with others are central to the arts. And it comes under enduring understanding, assessing our own and others' artistic work through critical thinking. Problem solving and decision making is central to artistic growth. Improve a performance, and this is the benchmark, improve a performance or project using various self-assessment tools, coaching, feedback, and/or constructive criticism. And the examples given are peer assessment, a rubric, criteria, coaching, feedback, criticism. So that's one of the benchmarks, and then she highlighted one more, I believe. There it is. Under skills, techniques, and processes, the big idea is that through dance, music, theater, and visual art, students learn that beginners, amateurs, and professionals benefit from working to improve and maintain skills over time. And it's under the first enduring understanding. The arts are inherently experiential and actively engage learners in the processes of creating, interpreting, and responding to art. And so in this, students are going to be both responding and creating. Actually, they do all three. They write monologues, scenes, and/or short plays using principles and elements of writing found in dramatic literature. I think that's all that she selected. Yes, it is. Okay, so we've gotten course specific. She has focused on playwriting for her unit. And I'm going to move this out of the way to bring in her lesson plan. And so she's written a lesson plan. The unit on the whole is titled Unlocking the Playwright Within, but this lesson is called Unlocking the Playwright Within, Statues. And again, the credit goes to Shannon O'Brien, who teaches at Childs High School in Leon County. And her learning goal, and she based it on the WALT process. We are learning to develop ideas. So it's develop ideas for writing plays. The focus is not on writing plays, but on developing ideas for writing plays. And then her success criteria, she wrote based on the sentence stem, I can, based on a teacher-provided prompt, so they aren't having to go out and search for their own prompts, their own inspiration, but I can, based on a teacher-provided prompt, write a properly formatted dialogue for one or more characters, develop characters through dialogue, improve writing through self and peer critiques, and critique peers in a positive manner. Now, these success criteria are oriented to the learning goal. So that is a unit learning goal. It is not a lesson learning goal. It is a unit learning goal. These success criteria are success criteria for the unit. Then that narrows down to the lesson objective, and I'm going to move this up a little bit. The lesson objective then becomes this. This beginning experience in playwriting helps build a safe environment and encourages creative risk-taking among new playwrights. And notice that playwrights is in quotes, so understanding that this is a very early experience with this. Now, I'm focusing today on one theater course and one theater lesson plan, knowing that all of you are absolutely brilliant at your work. I will tell you also that the Florida Alliance for Arts Education will have posted very shortly course descriptions and lesson plans written all along this line with learning goals, success criteria, and all of the other pieces. They're going to have lesson plans. We've got them all developed, all set up to go. These will be posted for you so that you'll have samples in each content area, and I think for the most part we'll have something at most levels so that you can look at various levels to see what's available. For today, because it's only an hour, we wanted to focus on just one content area, one lesson, so we could provide a solid thread. So please don't be disappointed that we aren't working in 4 content areas, 4 lesson plans. My feeling was that if we tried to do that, it would be very disjointed feeling. So I chose to stay with one content area to provide that continuity, knowing that you were all bright enough to transfer this knowledge to your own content area. I have no doubts that all of you can take this information and transfer it to whatever it is that you teach, because you're brilliant and you're experienced. So so we're looking at that. Here you see those 3 benchmarks, and then I'm going to show you that as part of the unit, Shannon wrote a previous lesson, Unlocking the Playwright Within, was called Unlocking blah, 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 and HATS. In the unit completion or follow-up activities, she has one, Unlocking the Playwright Within, first lines, and then she has another couple after that. And so she has a variety of different kinds of stimuli and prompts for the students, so that if perhaps one stimulus really doesn't speak to a student and a student is really struggling in one, students will perhaps find another kind of stimulus or prompt to be a little bit more possible, a little bit more stimulating for the creation of lines and dialogue. And so the particular lesson that Shannon created, and always based on this learning goal, always working toward the learning goal. The particular learning activity is a theater game. She has the students writing based on a thematic prompt. The students create a statue of 3 students, one being the sculptor and the other 2 students being the sculptor's clay. And then the teacher gives a thematic prompt like freedom, or electricity, or some other prompt. The statue is created, and then all the teams write the dialogue. And then the teacher chooses a dialogue. The playwright shares the dialogue with the team, coaches them on their performance. They perform, and then everyone in the class gives a peer critique using the rubric or scale as the basis of their critique. And I'll share that rubric with you in just a few minutes. And then depending on how time allows, the exercise is repeated several times using new teams new prompts, and she lists several other possible prompts: revenge, love, jealousy, hatred, and then other possible extensions for the lesson. And the end of the unit has students extending one piece of dialogue used somewhere else in the unit and extending it into a scene or a short play. And then she does include the rubric or scale for unlocking the playwright within. And I'll share that with you in just a few minutes. Bear with me. I'm going to switch back to my other monitor, and let's go on. So when we began at the source, we went, of course, to the course description, and the unit was on playwriting, and she selected a learning standard and a standard, language arts, and 2 theater benchmarks. And then she went on and created a lesson plan based on being part of an overall unit titled Unlocking the Playwright Within. And then she created this series of lessons within the unit and determined success criteria. And this, the learning goal, and the success criteria would all be on the wall or on the board, available to students so that they could see. And they could look up at any time while they were doing this and see that they needed to remember to format dialogue, etc. You might also imagine that learning to develop ideas might have had a learning goal before it that talked about how scripts and dialogue are formatted, and you can imagine that there might be 1 or 2 or more goals after this that would address going from developing ideas for writing plays into or toward writing scenes, writing acts, and writing plays. And so these learning goals might be developed further in later theater courses, 3 and 4, or they might be developed further in this course. So that gives you a little bit of a look at how the learning goals are developed, and a little bit of a look at how the success criteria are developed. Now, this is how her learning goals and success criteria look in CMAP. And this is on CPOMS. She has an account in iCPOMS, and this is the CMAP in iCPOMS. This is her learning goal, which says the students, I am learning to develop ideas for writing plays, which is here, and then the learning criteria, and here are all 4 of them. I can, based on a teacher-provided prompt, and there's the first one, I can, based on a teacher, blah, 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 the sentence stem, develop characters through dialogue. I'm sorry, this should say improve writing through self and peer critiques and critique in a positive manner. And then the standards and benchmarks that she chose were selected and put here. And then you can see in her notes she put down that she has these lessons. This is the one that you saw today, and she has several lessons. You can see that there's some even out of sight here today. So looking onward, this is, let me hold here for just a moment. What's out of sight, and I focus just on this particular learning goal, but imagine if you can see the rest of this, the full year, starting right at the beginning, you could so readily develop, and this is the whole point of learning goals, and this is the beauty of learning goals. I will tell you quite honestly, and I've been telling people, folks, I did not want to love this learning tool, CMAP, and the pieces in iCPOMS. To be perfectly honest, I didn't want to love it, and I do. I actually do love this tool. It works well, and it lays things out beautifully and easily. And what it does is to organize your thinking and help you determine how much time you have to teach and what you need to teach. It lets you lay it out in advance, and so you could readily take some time over the summer, look at the course description like we did earlier, and say, okay, we have to, in this course, help students develop skills within characterization, playwriting, etc. Lay out all of your learning goals, and you don't have to lay them out end to end. you can easily be working on 1 or 2 or 3 learning goals overlapping at once if they share benchmarks and standards. What a great time to, as it were, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And so you can be working on all of these items all at once. And then if you have a day for bad weather, or your students are gone for some sort of a field trip, or whatever, the school schedule changes, you can easily grab these learning goals and you can move them a day. And all of these items can be linked to them so that when you move this one day, these things all move with you. And then you can just adjust the length of them as you need to do. And so you can lay out all of your learning goals so that you can see them all, and you can say, oh gosh, I've got 25 learning goals. Is that too many? Do I need to make them more compact? What am I doing and when? Is this the right distribution? And you can look at them and be very realistic about the entire year and your lesson plans. And for next year, you can tweak them and make them better because there they are right in front of you. And you can say, boy, there's a lesson plan that worked beautifully. I want to keep it. I just want to tweak this. And you can look at that lesson plan and say, that one didn't work as well as I hoped. I think I'll sub one in instead of it. But it's all laid out. Your entire year is laid right out in front of you on CMAP. And it is yours. No one else can see it. It's yours. It's under your password. It's under your account. You can bring in and apply under resources. You can link to resources, all of your rubrics, any of your handouts to your students, any worksheets that you have. Your rubrics can go in here. Anything and everything that you might have as loose paperwork or anything along those lines. If your district has you using some sort of a digital program for grades and reporting, all of that kind of thing, CMAP, all of this work can be exported into Word or anything else and can be attached to your planning and grading, whatever your district may have you using. This can be exported into Word and attached. You can also share this with a colleague if you're team teaching, or if you and another colleague are being really smart and you are both teaching the same course and you are sharing resources. You can share resources in a static way. If you update them, you have to reshare, but you can share your resources, and that's a brilliant way to make all things better. So I wanted to share this CMAP layout with you and tell you what a powerful tool this is for laying out your entire year's plan, your entire year of learning goals, to make sure that you are going to be able to address all of the benchmarks, all of the standards, and address them in a way that is good for your students and makes sense and puts them in the right order. If you don't have them in an order that you think is as positive as you thought, switch them around. They move very easily. I happen to have this in a static screenshot right now, but if I were to show you, they move. You just click on them and drag them. They move very, very easily. We're going to look on at how to create a scalar rubric, and of course your success criteria go in as score 3.0 or 3 or whatever it is you use as a score. And the best idea is to have a 4-point spread, because if you have a 5-point spread, research has shown that we tend to go for the middle one. That becomes the average one, and unless something's really, really good or really, really bad, we tend to default to the middle one. And so 3.0 becomes the basic success. This is where they met expectations. They've pretty much got it. 4.0 or 4 becomes a matter of them getting something in depth above and beyond what was taught, or they're able to actually, in some people's minds, they're able to teach it to somebody else, or they're able to help somebody else. Score 2 means that they got the simpler, but they might not have gotten all of the complex ideas or processes. Score 1 or 1.0, they've got a partial understanding of some of the simpler some of them more complex, but they've needed some help. And 0.0, even with help, they've got no understanding or skill demonstrated. And sometimes I call this the dog ate my homework. You know, they've had a bad day. Sometimes they just need to live here. Let's look at a realistic, this is for Theater 2, for Unlocking the Playwright Within, statues. Helpful hints, again, use the success criteria in the 3.0 column. Use an even number of scores plus 0. For some age groups, it may be that you want to use the I can sentence stem. And of course, I want to acknowledge that it is entirely appropriate, as our questioner asked earlier, it's entirely appropriate to express a learning goal as an I can statement. And then I ask always, because I just love children and I like to look at the positive, I always ask that you add up from 0 to a total number of possible points. It's just, for this part, it just works well that way. And I just I just made this rubric a little larger for you so that you could read it a little bit more easily. This is Shannon's rubric based on her success criteria. And so if you went back to the success criteria and put them side by side, you would see that this is what I'm looking for. The dialogue is written for one or more characters, formatted correctly, character traits are evident, dialogue is believable, etc. This is students able to coach others. Character traits are subtle now. They're very evident, but they're subtle. And so it's not in your face. And on down through. And so you can see that across there. I'll give you just a minute to scan through there yourselves. I'm getting a little short on time, but I'll give you just a minute more. Remember, if I've gone very fast for you in some areas, that this will be archived. Okay, let's move on. So what are learning goals? This is a little bit of review. Remember that they answer the question, what do I want my students to know or be able to do? And they're a short list of very real concepts. They guide your teaching. They add clarity to it. And particularly if you have made the time to take that course description apart in advance and to devise all of your learning goals for the entire year. And that allows you to make sure that you're not going to shortchange some of the benchmarks, some of the standards, and it also makes sure that you don't over-teach some areas and that you don't get too detailed with some, not enough detail with others. And it allows you to take a look at what you might be able to teach together. Which learning concepts, which learning goals might you be able to overlap because they share several benchmarks or standards. And then learning goals also help students know what they should be doing. So remember, it's student-friendly language and posted where they can see it. And then it adds value to teaching and learning. It contributes to the course structure. It helps you choose the correct components or best components and practices. And I love the concept that it provides signposts for the students and it puts them inside the logic. It gives them a sense of ownership, and it gives you and your students a communication tool. And if you want to know more about Berkeley's descriptions of those teaching resources, the link is there. And again, just a quick look at why and for whom. Student engagement is a powerful, powerful learning tool. If they're engaged in the process, you've got them. And when they feel empowered, again, they're there with you and they're working hard. And when they can self-assess, they will work even harder. It helps learning goals help create focus, and it ensures that you are distributing the course requirements across the year very sensibly. And then it helps to inform you and your students. As I mentioned earlier, it helps you to identify learning gaps. It helps your students identify learning gaps. And I think it saves a lot of frustration, and that helps you and them plan for the next steps. And then it helps you inform not only your own planning, it helps you talk with students about what they need next. It helps you talk with administrators and with your students' parents when they're there to talk about how their students are doing. So here's an additional resource for you. I identified it as an ICPOMS. That's in error, and I will take that off before I archive this. The actual resource is Florida School Leaders website, and there is a module on here that explains learning goals in detail. Here's the website, floridaschoolleaders.org, and you need to register when you get there and then click on Academic Standards. When you get there, under Sharing Resources, click on Learning Goals, and then you'll find the complete module on learning goals for teachers and administrators. Once again, that's not on ICPOMS, it's on Florida School Leaders website. If you've got any questions or comments, once again, I encourage you to post them. We have just a few minutes for you to do that. In the meantime, while I'm giving you a chance to write any questions that you might have, I'm going to move on to share with you that we have 2 remaining webinars coming. The dates are there in front of you. Webinar 3 is on April 15th at the same time as this one, 5 to 6, and Webinar 4th comes up on May 13th, also from 5 to 6. The registration is at the same place that you found this one. Again, there's no cost to you, and there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that the Department of Education provides funding via a grant to the Florida Alliance for Arts Education, and they do that because the Alliance has made very good use of those funds, and that is often based on the feedback that we get from you. There is a series certificate of completion that you can earn by being in on these webinars. For your colleagues, if you need to go back to listening to this, or if your colleagues want to hear and see what you learned and heard today, they can go to the Alliance and they can do the archived version of this, and please have them do the feedback form as well. Here are the 2 remaining topics in no particular order. We'll make sure that you know which one is coming next. There is 1 remaining on assessment, keeping the end in mind right from the beginning. And then essential questions, making them essential, engaging, and deep. Someone has asked the question, if I didn't get to do the first webinar, can I access the archived version? Yes, you will be able to. I don't believe it's up there yet, but you will be able to access that one very shortly, and today's as well. And 3 and 4 will also be posted there. And any of the items that I've had you go to, for example, the three Word documents that I've had you look at today, those Word documents will also be available when you go to the archived version. They will be right beside the link or right below the link so that you can look at those 3 items. At the time that we looked at them today, you can look at them as well. So, thank you for your question. I appreciate both of you who've posted questions, and if anybody else has got them, we still have a couple of minutes, but not very long. I'm going to ask you to give us some very, very critical help. There will be a very brief online form, and it is very brief. I think it will be linked to the FAAE email, and here's why it's important. Your feedback on today's presentation helps the Alliance earn further grant funding next year, which then allows the Alliance to provide you with future professional development. So if we're to continue providing these webinars and the symposia that have been moving around the state, then we need to have that grant funding, which means we need to know how we did. It also helps us to provide better webinars because we really do read them, we really do take them seriously, and we really do our best to apply what it is you suggest to us and what you ask of us to make subsequent webinars and symposia and all of our other programs better and better each year. I would love to see all of you at the summit this year. It is in Orlando from June 18th to 20, and I must have been having a moment, a brain moment. It's June 18 to 20, 2014 in Orlando. I don't know what I was thinking, but June 18 to 20, 2014, that's an error that I'll clean up as well. So this June in Orlando, and I can tell you that Carol Vick, our executive director, is working very, very hard to make sure that that is a fabulous, fabulous summit for all of us to learn at, and I'll be there, and I hope you will be there as well. And now I want to thank you very, very much for your support and for being here. Again, today's presentation was provided by the Florida Alliance for Arts Education, and it was made possible by a grant through the Florida Department of Education, and we thank them most kindly. My name is Dr. Linda Lovins, and I'm the director and a consultant with Linda Lovins & Associates. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me at artsedlyn@gmail.com or at the phone number that you see there. It's my office phone, and I would be very, very pleased to talk with you, and I will look forward to seeing you in April at our next webinar. And so you take care. If you've got any further questions, be sure to get in touch with us. Take care. Bye-bye.